Hi, I have another great scrappy block for you this week. This one's called Sedona, and it's week number 5 of my 52-week series of scrappy blocks, and I'm holding this in conjunction with my mystery quilt class as well. So that's part 2 of my mystery quilt class. Hopefully you're joining me for both events, my 52-week series of scrappy blocks, as well as my mystery quilt for fall of 2022. My name is Lori Dickman. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel, Quilting with Lori. If you have not yet had an opportunity to watch my video on how to cut, sort, organize, store, and use your scrap stash, I'm going to put a link below in the description box for you to check that out. I'm also going to link below my book set here. This is the techniques book where I teach you step by step how to go through your stash, cut, sort, organize, store, and actually use your own scrap stash to make beautiful quilts. And then this is the corresponding patterns book. There are 12 gorgeous patterns in here made from your scrap stash. It's amazing what beautiful quilts you can make from your very own personal scrap stash, which you've cut, organized, sorted, and have ready to use. So now let's take a look at what is required for the Sedona block. I'm going to show you a block that I've already put together using yardage, and then I am going to show you how to sew the block using your scrap stash. So on the table here in front of me is a Sedona block. It is really a very easy block to do. It's predominantly 2.5-inch squares. And then this week we are going to use a new technique using our Speedy Solution scrap stash to make flying geese units by simply creating 2 half-square triangles for each of the flying geese units. Last week we used a different method using our Speedy Solution scrap stash, and this week we're going to learn this method. Now for this particular block, it is done using yardage. So I had used 2 darks, and a medium and a light. So these are the colors that I used, the fabrics that I used to create this block. But now I'm going to show you how to create this block using your stash. There are PDFs attached. Make sure that if you're part of the scrap stash for the 52-week series, make sure that you download the Sedona block PDF, which is attached in the description box. It'll give you the instructions on how to put the block together, and I'll be showing you that in a moment here when we get up to the sewing machine. And the Mystery Quilt students will grab their PDF from my blog, and I will have the link to that blog out on my site for all of you as well. So here we have the blocks that are required for this particular Sedona block, or the squares that are required for this block. So we have a total of 10 dark 2.5-inch squares. We have a total of 8 medium 2.5-inch squares, 8 lights, and then we also have some 3-inch darks, 4 of them, and 3-inch lights, 4 of those, from which we are going to make our half-square triangles. So let's head to the sewing machine and I'll show you how this is going to be put together. So the first thing we're going to do is make our half-square triangles for this block, and we'll have those ready to go to put the rest of the block together. So I'm going to move this out of the way. And to make the half-square triangles, we are simply going to we pull larger squares and then we're going to square them up to 2.5 inches because that's what they'll need to be when they're finished. So we're going to put a light on top of a dark, and so I'm going to pair them all up, right sides together, and then I'm going to draw a diagonal line from one corner to the other corner. And then we are simply going to sew a scant 1/4 of an inch from one on each side of the drawn line. So let's see how that's done. So I have done these in assembly line fashion, and I am just placing them in there. I'm sewing a scant 1/4 of an inch, which is like 2 threads less than a 1/4 of an inch on each side of the drawn line. I'm at the bottom of these 4 units. Now I'm going to simply flip it around and come down the other side of the drawn line. So they are sewn. Now when I cut my half square triangle units apart, I like to cut them so that I trim off that extra dog ear, and it helps so there's not quite so much excess fabric there. So I've trimmed it there and there straight across. For cutting on the diagonal line, you can simply use your scissors, whichever is more convenient, or the rotary cutting mat, whichever is more comfortable for you. And then we are going to press all of these open and press toward the dark. Let me do that and I will be right back. So I've just about completed squaring up my half square triangles. I'm using a 4.5 inch square up ruler. There are so many different types of square up rulers that are available on the market. There are black lock rulers. You can simply use square rulers like this. Whatever you have that works best for you is what I would recommend that you use. You don't have to go out and buy special tools. As long as you have a ruler that's larger than the square that you're squaring this up to, it'll work. And these have to be squared up to 2.5 inches so that they all match the 2.5 inch blocks that we are going to be sewing them with. So it's very important that each and every half square triangle gets squared up to 2.5 inches. The next thing we're going to do is create the flying geese unit, putting the two half square triangle units together in this arrangement. And you can mix and match them if you don't want them to match. You're welcome to make them as scrappy as you want. When I pulled my dark squares originally from my scrap container, there were 4 3-inch blocks right in a row that were dark, and so that's what I used to create these. But you can make it as scrappy as you like. So let's go ahead and sew these, and we'll simply sew them together, matching up those seams up there, and we'll sew them at 1/4 inch seam allowance. For your flying geese units, a great way to sew those points so that that beautiful point there matches up wonderfully is to nest those seams. That does mean that one of these seam allowances is going to be on the light, but it will help things to lay nicely. So if you want to nest them like that, I would go ahead and do so. And although this was pressed to the dark, I'm going to move this seam allowance to the light so that this corner up here will nest very nicely. So here we have our 4 flying geese units. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now these last 3 here that I did, I definitely nested, and you'll see where they do lay much nicer. You do in fact need to have that 1/4 inch seam allowance there so that when you attach this flying geese unit to the next square, there will be that seam allowance available so you don't cut your point off. That's really important. Now we're going to press these and square them up to 2.5 by 4.5 inches. So if you have pressed your seam allowances to the dark, then you could press your seam open if you choose. That will help it to lay nice and flat. Or what I did, as you saw, I moved my one, although both my seam allowances had been pressed to the dark originally, I did move this down and I nested it so that they nested beautifully. And then when I've pressed it open, everything is pressed this direction. All of the seams are going in that direction and it will lay very nicely. So those are a couple of options for you. So the next thing we're going to do is make our 4 patches. And we have 3 dark 4 patches that need to be put together for this block, and we have 2 medium 4 patches, and by that I mean dark with lights and then medium with lights. So I'm going to go ahead and get those sewn together, and you'll see that as I'm working on that, and I'll be right back. And now I've just squared up each of these units to 4.5 inches. So these are my 2 light and medium, and these are my 3 dark and light 4-patch units. Now we're going to make the 4-patch units using our Flying Geese units. Now for these 4-patch Flying Geese units, we're going to be using mediums and darks, and we need to make 4 of these units. However, keep in mind that 2 of the units are going to have the mediums on the right with the darks on the left, and 2 of the units will have the mediums on the left with the darks on the right. So make sure as you're sewing these units together that that's how you're accomplishing that. So I have each of the 4-patch units done. There are 3 4-patches that consist of the dark 2.5 inch squares and the light 2.5 inch squares, and they go in a diagonal through the block. There are 2 4-patch units that consist of medium fabrics as well as lights, and those are all 2.5 inch squares. Then there are 4 4-patch units that each consist of a Flying Geese unit, dark and light, and some dark and medium squares. However, you'll notice that the darks and mediums are in a certain arrangement here. So make sure as you're piecing your dark and mediums to your Flying Geese units that you're piecing them correctly. You'll see this unit has the dark on this side, the medium on that side. This unit has the dark on the left and the medium on the right, and that's my left and right. And that's how this is done for all 4 of these blocks. So now that I have each of the 4-patch units finished, they are all pressed, they are all squared up to 4.5 inches square. Now I'm going to web the block, and I'm simply going to web them in columns. So I'm going to take the second square here, place it over and sew that, and just continue on down, and then I'll add the 3rd column to that. Okay, so the block is now squared up to 12.5 inches. I have pressed the block and it is ready to go. So both of the blocks are done. This one was done using yardage and this one was done using the scraps. And in both cases it's with light, medium, and dark fabrics. And if you'll take a peek at this block, you'll see that it's predominantly 2.5 inch squares. We have darks running across the diagonal. We have medium fabrics. We have our Flying Geese units made with darks and lights. And then they're attached to some squares. And a simple way to ensure that everything is lined up properly in the center is just to notice that we have a dark, medium, dark, medium, dark, medium, dark, medium, dark, medium, dark, medium. That helps you to ensure that everything is lined up properly. Hope you've enjoyed making the Sedona block. Leave a comment below, let me know how you're using the Sedona block and if you're part of my mystery quilt class. Don't forget to download the links for the PDFs below, and don't forget to also check out all of the links that I've included for additional tutorials. You'll find all of that in the description box below. Thanks so much. My name is Lori Dickman. Thanks so much for stopping by Quilting with Lori. Have a great day.